One of the things that distinguish man from the animals is the power of speech. While it is true that most animals and birds can utter cries which indicate emotion, anger, fear, affection, nevertheless, their range of sounds is very limited, so that they are not capable of expressing more complicated emotions. On the other hand, man can express a very wide range of ideas and emotions through speech. Words are only symbols to which special values and meanings have become attached by general agreement. The same object, consisting of printed pages and a cover, is called by a French speaker livre, by an English speaker book, and by a Hindi speaker kitab. The object is the same in each case, but in each linguistic community a different word to describe it has been agreed upon. Other symbols may be used instead of linguistic ones. A red light is used to indicate danger, a policeman's upheld hand tells us to stop, a forefinger held to the lips warns us to be quiet, but these substitutes are fairly few in number and therefore cannot be used except in very limited circumstances.
Christopher Columbus, the famous navigator and explorer who is credited with the discovery of America, although he was not the first European to visit the New World, was born in 1451 in Genoa, Italy. The site of his birth has been a matter of debate for quite some time, but several documents confirm that he was born in the Republic of Genoa as the eldest of 5 children to Domenico Colombo and Susanna Fontanaressa. Little is known all about Columbus' early life and childhood. He first went to sea when he was 18 years old and started making voyages for the Genoese firms at age of 21. When Columbus arrived to Portugal is not exactly known, but in 1479, he married Filipa Moniz Perislo, a daughter of the Portuguese explorer Bartolomé Perislo, circa 1395 to 1457. He first lived with his wife in Lisbon, where his mother-in-law showed him Perislo's documents about the western lands in the Atlantic, which probably influenced his theory about a westward route to Asia. He then moved to Porto Santo, where his wife Filipa died shortly after giving birth to his son Diego.
I should say one more thing about theory. It's great to discover theory, but you have to lose a lot, and you may have noticed, or maybe you didn't, how much you lose. Partly, you don't notice it much because here at the university everybody's dedicated to theory, and what's left out is, perception cause you use your mind not your eyes. Skill you're not supposed to have any particular, sort of bodily kind of skills, there's a kind of mental thing, but let's not call that skill. I'm just calling skill the way you cope with everyday stuff that you use and so forth. Intuition, it's not fair to have intuition, I mean you can have intuition, but it's not theory, it's not something that everybody has to believe until you can put it into language and argue for it. Gets rid of emotions, the body, tradition.
Coral reefs are one of the most fragile, biologically complex, and diverse marine ecosystems on Earth. This ecosystem is one of the fascinating paradoxes of the biosphere. How do clear, and thus nutrient-poor, waters support such prolific and productive communities? Part of the answer lies within the tissues of the corals themselves. Symbiotic cells of algae known as zooxanthellae carry out photosynthesis using the metabolic wastes of the coral, thereby producing food for themselves, for their corals, hosts, and even for other members of the reef community. This symbiotic process allows organisms in the reef community to use sparse nutrient resources efficiently. Unfortunately for coral reefs, however, a variety of human activities are causing worldwide degradation of shallow marine habitats by adding nutrients to the water. Agriculture, slash and burn, land clearing, sewage disposal and manufacturing that creates waste byproducts all increase nutrient loads in these waters. Typical symptoms of reef decline are destabilized herbivore populations and an increasing abundance of algae and filter-feeding animals. Declines in reef communities are consistent with observations that nutrient input is increasing in direct proportion to growing human populations, thereby threatening reef communities sensitive to subtle changes in nutrient input to their waters.
Cheapness and its cinematic markers, such as handheld camera work and low or high contrast light, aren't themselves guarantors of a tone of artistic authenticity. In fact, they're often misused by filmmakers short of inspiration as badges of sincerity that take the place of actual artistry. The theatrical realism of many older, ostensibly classic movies have dated terribly and reflect the very exclusions and compromises of the system that produced them. Only the ingenious exertions and inventions of a slender minority of great filmmakers could circumvent and override them. Yet, critics fetishize the styles of studio-era movies and take them for an enduring and immutable aesthetic standard, as if, with an appreciation of Shakespeare came a comparable fixation on lesser Elizabethans and a disdain for latter-day dramatists for not writing in iambic pentameter.
Modern history abounds with violence fueled by apocalyptic myths, not always explicitly religious in nature. The aim of the Jacobin terror in revolutionary France was the creation of a modern state. If the violent suppression of the peasant revolt in the Vendée is included, the casualties ran into the hundreds of thousands. The myths that possessed these anarchists in their campaigns of assassination were secular myths of social transformation. Lenin avowedly followed the Jacobin example when he used the Cheka to create a modern state in Russia. One of the factors that distinguished Nazism and fascism from conventional tyrannies was the belief that a new society could be fashioned by the systematic use of terror. Violent jihadism has more in common with these modern totalitarian movements than is commonly supposed.
The economic recession has hit America's youth particularly hard. Nearly 4 million of the unemployed are young people 25 and under. Many of them are not teenagers who need a minimum wage job to earn pocket money to spend on weekends. They're young adults who need a job, and job skills, so that they can support themselves and, sometimes, their families. More than 5 million young people ages 16-24 are disconnected from employment and education and living in high-poverty communities in this country. Some of them are lucky. Some live in areas that have jobs and education programs that target youth and help them complete their education, learn job skills and find jobs that allow them to advance and earn a livable wage. What about the ones who are not living in such areas? Will they be subjected to further despondency, or will the education programs ultimately reach their locations too? The crisis begins in the womb with unplanned parenthood. Women with unplanned pregnancies are less likely to seek prenatal care. In the U.S., 80% of teenage pregnancies and 56% of all pregnancies are unplanned. The problems continue after birth, where unplanned pregnancies and unstable partnerships often go hand in hand. Since 1950, the number of single-parent families has nearly tripled. More than 25% of all births today are to unmarried mothers. As the number of single-parent families grows and more women enter the workforce, infants and toddlers are increasingly in the care of people other than their parents. Most disturbingly, recent statistics show that American parents are increasingly neglecting or abusing their children. In only 4 years from 1987 to 1991, the number of children in foster care increased by over 50%. Babies under the age of 1 are the fastest growing category of children entering foster care. The crisis affects children under the age of 3 most severely, the report says. Yet, it is this period from infancy through preschool years that sets the stage for a child's future.
The mid-20th century Great Migration of African Americans from the South to the urban North represents one of the largest internal migrations in history. That pattern in some ways is being reversed. The return migration proceeded beneath the radar of scholars until the late 1990s and 2000s, when northeastern and midwestern cities such as New York, Philadelphia, Detroit, and Chicago, prime destinations during the Great Migration, endured extreme population loss as the reverse migration to the south intensified. From 2000 to 2010, The black population increased most in the suburbs of four southern cities, Atlanta, Washington, D.C., Dallas, and Houston, popular destinations for America's growing black middle class, Frey 2015. As part of these trends, researchers are looking at dynamics relating to the emergence of the middle-class black suburban enclave.
Every year, foreign governments and other overseas entities spend about $500 million trying to influence American policy, according to the Project on Government Oversight. The Foreign Agents Registration Act, FARA, enables researchers to track their spending and sway. The federal law was adopted in 1938 when Congress was worried about Nazi propaganda in the United States. It was updated in 1966 to cover activities more broadly political. Today under FARA, which is run by the U.S. Department of Justice, lobbyists and other organizations are required to regularly declare their relationships with foreign principals, their meetings, payments, as well as the informational materials they use to influence policymakers, such as presentations, email correspondence, even draft legislation. Much of the documentation is available on the FARA website, though there are holes in both the legislation and implementation.
We've decided to adopt, just as a loose theme for the course, a biological theme so that you can see the connections between chemistry and biology and the things that you might consider doing in the future. We want you to think about the molecules that are relevant to your body, the processes that occur in your body, the chemistry that's going on and how energy plays a role. And we divided the course into 4 sections, and after each section there will be a midterm. The first one, or an exam. The first one is about matter.
In February 2016, as infection moved rapidly through the range occupied by Aedes mosquitoes in the Americas, WHO declared that Zika infection associated with microcephaly and other neurological disorders constituted a public health emergency of international concern. By the start of February 2016, local transmission of Zika infection had been reported from more than 20 countries and territories in the Americas, and an outbreak numbering thousands of cases was underway in Cabo Verde in Western Africa.
Health education intervention programs are currently available to improve cognitive understanding of the importance of adopting certain dietary and physical activity behaviors and lifestyle choices. The aims of such programs are to improve health. The Coronary Health Improvement Project is a health education intervention that teaches people the importance of making better choices in nutrition, physical activity, and tobacco in order to prevent, arrest, and even reverse coronary heart disease.
When you first examine something under a microscope, say a leaf from a plant, you're amazed at how much detail there is, and it's a detail that you simply cannot see without magnification. And what you can see with the naked eye becomes suddenly huge under the lens. How big everything looks is astonishing, but it's also amazingly intricate. Suddenly it's as if another world has opened up in front of your eyes and you think, hey, I hadn't realized that something so small, so tiny, could be so. Old age, the last stage of life, is solid and at the same time fragile. It is solid because the old people carry a treasure of knowledge and experience. They are firm in their ideas and opinions. It is fragile because of the declining physical capacities. Typically, the old people are more affected by a feeling of being old than being physically old. The old people,